Good evening. My name is David Wood, and I am the Special Projects Manager for Early Music America. And we want to welcome you to another one of our interest sessions and webinars. And this evening, we'll be exploring Renaissance improvisation. We're hoping that you're going to be joining us with instruments or singing from home, whether you're watching on Facebook or you're joining us on Zoom. And there'll be some opportunity for some of you who are joining us on Zoom to even share some of the music if you choose to do that. And in just a little bit, I'll be sharing a link to the materials that we'll be looking at this evening so that you can follow along at home if you haven't had those already. You can find out more information about Early Music America at our website, earlymusicamerica.org, where you can find early music news, information about webinars and interest sessions, and many other programs. And you can also find out how to find us on social media by going to Facebook or Instagram, Twitter, and on YouTube. And speaking of YouTube, we'll be archiving this evening's session on YouTube along with all of our other webinars and interest sessions. And of course, you can find performance videos and more at our YouTube channel. And if you'd like to find out more about the programming from Early Music America, you can find out in our eNotes newsletter. We'll have the next copy that goes out tomorrow. If you would like to have access to that, you can always use the button at the bottom of earlymusicamerica.org, or you can send a text to 42828 and just put early music in the message for that, and then there will be some instructions as to how to join the newsletter mailing list from Early Music America. So this evening, I'd like to welcome our presenter, John Tyson. John is a member of the faculty at New England Conservatory, and also a well-known international performer and many times recording artist. And this evening, John will be talking to us about Renaissance improvisation, and the session will last about 45 to 50 minutes, and we'll also have time for questions. And you can feel free to submit your questions throughout this evening's session in the chat function, or if you're following us on Facebook right now, you can put that into the comments section, and we'll be happy to address those as well as we can. If you would like to know more about improvisation, clearly we're not going to learn everything tonight in the next 60 minutes or so, but you can always study with John privately, and we'll be I'll be putting his email into the chat here in just a little bit so you can contact him afterwards. And I'll also remind you at the end of the presentation how to contact him if you'd like to find out more, if you'd like to study this material anymore with him privately. And then you can always go back and look at this material once again on YouTube, like I had mentioned earlier. So John, we'd like to just welcome you, and I'm going to hand it over to you and take it away.
David, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And so Renaissance improvisation. So what's Renaissance improvisation? Well, I grew up musically, probably like a lot of you, studying classical music. I did my undergrad degree in clarinet, so I got to play the classical canon there. But I also, like I think all of us, listened to a lot of different kinds of music, world music, and I was particularly infatuated with the freedom of expression and the ability to improvise that rock and roll had or that jazz had. And when I finally discovered Renaissance music, something rang true. I play all kinds of music. I'm fortunate to do a lot of contemporary music. I have a Renaissance music group by the name of Renaissonics. I play with a pop band. I play with orchestras. But I end up doing a lot of Renaissance music because it kind of satisfies me musically. Renaissance music is a funny kind of middle ground in Western music. It is brilliantly high art, and yet it allows the performer the freedom that we usually associate with popular music or jazz or something like that, including the freedom to improvise in very complex compositions. So let's talk a little bit about the Renaissance here. This whole class is a little bit of a tease. I'm going to try to cover a lot of materials, kind of show you what you can do with the materials I've left you, but we're going to have to go through it very, very quickly. I'd love to talk. If you have some burning issues, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to run through some things and I will give you a chance to play along very soon. Let's do just a moment about knowing a little bit more about the Renaissance because I think it helps our mindset. Let me share a screen with you here. And I'm going to show you a little bit of a PowerPoint that I do with my New England Conservatory classes. And if I can get it here. Okay. So interesting to know about the Renaissance, but this is very much geared to helping us understand how to play better. So have a look at this. If you don't know Giordano Bruno, you want to. One of the, I think, great thinkers of the West and of the Renaissance. Isn't that amazing? Is it Zen? Is it theoretical physics? Is it, but it, to me, starts by knowing more what was going on. It gives me more the strength of my convictions. Renaissance, some of the hallmarks of Renaissance music, this age of discovery, this brilliant age of Leonardo and Shakespeare and Galileo and all that, where arts and science and philosophy were all kinds of synthesized in a way that we maybe don't do so much these days. They had a heroic belief in human genius, and we see it very much in Bruno. Let's go on. Have to add this. Shakespeare is very much a Renaissance man. Whoops, is that Renaissance? There is a point here. I love this. This is Jackson Pollock. And I think it's brilliant. I'm a huge fan. What's the subject? I don't know. Right? It's composition number so-and-so. Renaissance. What's the subject? Boom. We know instantly. And one thing to keep in mind here is that Renaissance visual art and Renaissance music is not abstract. They believed in the human condition. They believed in our powers. And they believed that understanding reality was what they wanted to do, was the way to wisdom, the way to understanding. So it's unbelievably realistic. And it's unbelievably touching, I think also. This is the portrait of a real person here. I'm going to go very quickly, but let me just, show you a couple more things. Beautiful Renaissance blend of rich culture, poor culture, everything together, the cosmos. Absolutely beautiful and spectacular technique. So how does this help us play music? Well, to me, it helps a lot. I think about this when I play music. So this is Botticelli, The Birth of Venus, again, heroically, proudly humans. They're gods and goddesses here, but they are humans. And when I see these wonderful dryads here floating in the air, being incredibly graceful, strong, I want to play like that. I want to be able to play with that kind of fluidity. I want to hear my phrases floating strong and magically all at the same time. Have to talk about this. I think it is so beautiful that we often think that maybe our greatest visual art of Western culture is it's endlessly complex, it's unbelievably beautiful, but it's not abstract, and in fact, it's pretty normal. It's a woman sitting there. The background isn't even that fanciful. These hills are still there. This bridge I go over every summer close to Arezzo. But to see the normal, what we would call normal life, as high art, to me informs me and empowers me when I play. We'll talk about that later. Raffaello, beautiful, beautiful paintings. But this I think about a lot when I play. We see what's there again. Renaissance art and Renaissance music is endlessly complex, but not difficult to understand. This is Michelangelo's David. Huge statue, 17 feet tall or so, that shamelessly nude human. But for all the strength, for all the grandeur, look at how graceful it is. Look at how proud and comfortable David is in his own being. And when we play phrases, it helps me to be reminded of this, that I could be very much like 19th century Romanticism. I could be huge and grandiose and long, long, strong, expressive phrases, and at the same time be this graceful and this at ease. So let me add something else to this here. Where can I share? Actually, let me stop the share for a moment. And again, if you have burning issues, please let me know. Where did everybody go? Nope. I'm trying to stop share. Thank you very much. David, I'm open to, for some reason, I have lost my screen. Excuse me just a minute here. There we go. So, let's go back here. So, what I'd like to do is put this in music here. So, how can we be that normal and that artistic? I want to do a little free improvisation. Even if you have no experience with improvisation, you're actually a good improviser. Because if you think about it, when we improvise, most of what we do is our own personal contribution. Even if you're reading the notes very studiously, the majority of what you play, you're actually making up. The notation doesn't tell you your tone color. It usually doesn't tell you rubato. It often doesn't tell you dynamics. It usually doesn't tell you articulation. It doesn't tell you the feeling. It doesn't tell you when to vibrate or not. So we tend to think that crescendoing or decrescendoing or vibrating or changing tone color is not improvisation, but changing a note. Now that's improvisation, and that's hard, and I can't do that. And the Renaissance did not have this problem. To them, it was music. And music and language were so close that they kind of expected everyone to be able to speak in their own way. The compositional style is polyphony, where each voice is a soloist in this wonderfully intertwining web of polyphony, but each person gets to tell their own story in their own way. The ultimate musical democracy. So let's do this. How to put it together. I'm going to ask you something really, really hard. I'm going to ask you to play one note and then hear how you go to the next note. Basic music making, but it wouldn't make a typically good phrase if we played. We go somewhere in music. Just like in language, we do not speak syllables. We go somewhere with it. We linger, we move ahead. And to them, they were hearing music and language as surprisingly similar. So if I played, say, 3 notes, I could play. I could vary it just to make different expression. Everybody can do that. A beginner who can play one or two notes can do that. If you want, try that on your own, because everything I'm going to say tonight is built on your confidence of being able to do that. Anybody want to play along? Anybody want to unmute? I'm going to ask you to play 3 notes, and let's stay stepwise so I can tie it into what we're going to do. Yeah. But anyone want to just do it, and you can do anything you want. You can change notes, you can just change rhythms or volume as I was doing. You could go. But the point is that I don't like the word ornamentation. I like the word embellishment in the purest sense, that what we do makes the music more beautiful. So instead of just going F, G, A, I might want to go. Anybody want to experiment and let the rest of us hear? 3 notes, any tempo. Any volunteers?
Let's see. We do have one. So here, Brad, I'm gonna ask for you to unmute, and you can give us your example.
How did you become such a good improviser? Right? We think a lot of, especially if you haven't done it much, we think we are not improvisers, but this is about the most natural thing you will ever do. And it's kind of at the core of what's going on in Renaissance music, both in how you express and how you speak gracefully and sincerely, and also the freedom to do it differently every time. And we already have that technique. Anybody else want to demonstrate how easy it is? Now's your chance. I'll ask you to play along later if not. Okay, so could we do this then? So one of the punchlines of this course is that you understand, I think instinctively, when we're doing this, we're not decorating in the artificial sense, right? I'm doing something that makes more music. This is a course on Renaissance improvisation because we're drawing from the rich, rich wealth of Renaissance resources. This is a course very much, though, on melodic improvisation in general. And that way, how do you say, it's appropriate to all repertoires. You can do this in any repertoire that your conductor doesn't yell at you not to or something like that. But in singing your songs and playing your Baroque sonatas and playing your romantic music, they were still improvising in the 19th century, in singing your pop songs. And what we're going to do tonight is follow the Renaissance example and learn to hear that our contributions, whether we change notes or not, are simply expression. This is primarily a course on playing more expressively all the time. So if I wanted to play something jivey, I could do it with rhythms. Or I could play. Or I could play something dreamy and a little free form. Doesn't that sound easy? If you experiment a little bit, you will find that this is easy. So if we stopped right now, I hope you've learned something, and I hope you'll have the strength of your convictions just to play anything. Play your pop songs, play your scales more interestingly all the time. Could we go on with this? And let me share one more thing with you. To draw on Renaissance sources. Can everybody see that? Is that full page enough for everybody?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, so this is from Ortiz's wonderful book. How do we know how they improvised in the Renaissance? They left a lot of information and a lot of instruction manuals. So this edition that Laura Conrad of Serpent Publications and I did is available for free. I didn't send the link yet, but I will leave it with David, so you can download it for free. If you want to make a contribution to Laura, that's wonderful. Her site, Serpent Publications, if you're interested in Renaissance music, is your best friend. And especially if you've read my article, Rehearsing Renaissance Music, it should make it a lot more easy to have access to these hundreds and hundreds of pieces that Laura has put up as a labor of love. They are for free. So here's the frontispiece. Don't look at the dirty Renaissance drawings there. And let me scroll through this very quickly here. And I want to show you how we would start using this book here. So just an example here. If I wanted to annotate this just to show you something, here, I'm just going to circle this. I'm going to call this the frame. This is the bass unembellished interval that he's given. And then he shows us how many, 11, 12 different examples of how to play this with more variety and more expression. Renaissance improvisation is not a lot of little blocks that we try to fit in to the piece. They are an integral part of the piece, and they only really make sense if they further your musical desires. So what I would do in studying this, instead of just playing through a lot of things and hope you will turn out magically to be an improviser someday, let's approach it thoughtfully. Look at number one. So we see this interval. He didn't even give a clef. You can play it in any clef. Let's, for convenience, play from B natural to C in any octave you want. So before we play that, we know what B and C sounds like. Look at number one and think, why would I want to do that embellishment? It's for an expressive reason. So what is it? It's probably not jivey. It's probably not frantic. It's moving on that interval. It's letting it float a little bit more, right? So again, not unlike the Mona Lisa, it doesn't have to knock your socks off with drama to be amazingly touching, sincere art. So what I would do with all these is look ahead. So if I were, say, going to improvise this second example, I would look at the example first, and then I would practice saying, well, in that example, it looks like maybe it floats along even more than the first one. It's something like it's giving me more things to do, and it's giving me more various ways to play that interval. So then I would go back and play the interval as if I wanted it to really float a lot. And simply further my musical desires by building up some vocabulary, and in this case, using his second ornament. You can play it the way you want, but in this very vocally oriented Renaissance music, this doesn't look like it wants to go. It just doesn't say that to me. For instance, number 6 here is quite different than the frame, isn't it? Well, it's still the same frame, but instead of just going, to me it's a little bit more ecstatic. So here I hope you'll start feeling like a Renaissance musician, where expression and improvisation and just good musicianship are not different. It's all part and parcel of the same thing. We want to hear good tones. We want to hear good phrases. We want to hear sincere, heart-to-heart expression. Let me close this, and would you take out the materials that I sent? And one is called Embellishments Seconds. And it looks like something like that, right? Embellishments Seconds. I was saying this course is kind of a tease to give you a lot of possibilities. If you come study with me, we will talk about the deeper meaning of all these possibilities. We will play around with them, and I'll give you a lot more. But just take a look. All I'm doing is giving you kind of my own take of helpful ways to internalize these techniques very quickly and very musically. So it's just a scale. After that, I give you Ganassi's example one. Some other time we'll talk about Ganassi, one of my favorite writers on music of all time, and a viola da gamba player, and wrote one of the most amazing books on any instrument that I know, his Fontegaro, written for recorder. And this is the very first musical example he gives. He just goes up 6 notes, and you can see the frame is just, if we think of this in treble clef, it's just F and 4 notes embellishment up to G, up to A, B, C, D. So instead of playing which could be beautiful, Ganassi gives us a very simple all quarter notes example of what you could do without a lot of finger virtuosity. And I think it's kind of disarmingly musical. So again, here that I'm not just playing a bunch of funny notes, I'm going from F, 4 notes later to G, to A, to B flat as a very long phrase. And here's what Ganassi had to say about it. And you could play it over and over many different ways, but if you're doing, the most important thing is hearing that it's going from one note to the other, then you're learning something, you're becoming more musical. Could we play? Why don't you just join me? Mute yourselves, and I'm going to do number 1. So when you play this, don't just play, oh, I'm going to do that on another note. You're missing the point. The point is not to play 4 notes. The point is to get to the 5th note. If we're playing music, we go. So even if you just want to practice a few notes, always go to the arrival note. So when we're playing this, it is not an exercise in the mechanical sense. It is an exercise for the ear to be able to build up your being accustomed to hear endless possibilities of how we get from one note to the next. Why don't you play along with me? We're going to play a little rubato, and we might get off and we'll still learn a lot. So here you're training your ear to hear a very simple repeated pattern that can be endlessly musical, that carries you all the way through the scale. So I'm thinking about half notes, 1, 2, and ta-da-dee-dum-dum. And play along with me if you feel so moved. I'm playing an F major scale, 1 and 2. I have to be very quick because we have a very small amount of time here tonight. Look at number 3. We're just doing ascending scales here. Play that with me. Like learning any new language, you have to hear the words many, many times for them to to internalize them. Here we're training ourselves to see, hear, think endless possibilities. We are developing vocabulary. So number 3 is the same scale. It's the same tune, but we're going to play it with different notes. Wow. And we're going to play it with our own expression differently each time we do it. Let's do number 3. I'll give you 4 half notes before we start. And hear your own expression. Play it the way you would like to hear it. 1 and 2 and ready and 3. And I got a little inspired at the end. I wanted to do a little bit more. And you will find after you do this a couple of times, if you're really hearing it, you can start doing your own. Let's do this for time's sake. So the next step, first of all, I would really play through all these pages if you're serious about this. It gives you some finger technique. It gives you your ear a great training to hear the same melody, in this case a scale, the same melody over and over with so many different kinds of expression. Right now, look at number 1 and look at number 3. Pretty easy to internalize, right? Number 1. Number 3. But we're making more music because we have other possibilities. Could you very quickly, this is a test for the professional and very advanced players, I want to play it one more time. I'm going to make my own version. You're going to make your own version. But the practice we're doing right now is we're only going to do either embellishments in number 1 or embellishments in number 3. So ideally, we would play these a few more times to get them in our fingers, in our ear. But just see if you can start to internalize. And there's no right or wrong. You can do number 1 most of the time or number 3 most of the time. But just see if you can enjoy that change between going and in any variation you want. Let's try it. 1 and 2 and mix and match. 1 and go. If you find this exciting, I think you're a good musician because you start feeling endless possibilities. You start feeling more expressive. You start feeling like more of a creative musician. And I think it's almost impossible not to feel like you're making better phrases. Right? Language comes in phrases. Renaissance music comes in phrases. Very complex, but very normal sounding phrases. So as much as I would like to do number 5 and get fancier, and instead of going to go and mix and match that with some of the others there. But make sure you're comfortable with it before you try that. Let's go on. Oh, I don't want to go on yet. And let's look at Ganassi's first example. There's 2 pages. I might have in the wrong order. Yes, I do. So it's here. And it says examples on one page and of divisions on the other in Ganassi. And so this is, again, the very first thing he gives you. And I love his pedagogy. He's obviously writing for experienced musicians. He's giving us simply the 6-note hexachord, C up to A, and he's giving us 8 brilliantly varied ways of playing it. And before he introduces us to his book of examples of embellishments on intervals, more than 2,000, and maybe the most rhythmically complex collection of music I've ever seen anywhere. He gets it in your ear. He lets you hear what's going on. We already played his very first example. That's very pretty. Let me play another. Let me play his number 5. So number 1 is easy, right? Here I'm going to think maybe quarter notes or half notes, but look at it before you play. It looks like some kind of abstract variation on the scale. His number 5 and the line below is his ornamentation of it. But really what he's doing is he's hearing with a lot of personal expression. So he's still playing that piece, but he's playing it, showing us that we could do it this way. So if you're not a virtuoso, you might have to practice a little bit other things before that. That's why I gave you my kind of synthesis of a lot of things here. But you hear the endless possibilities. Charlie Parker has nothing on Silvestro Ganassi. Jimi Hendrix has nothing on Silvestro Ganassi. It is unbelievably fast, brilliant, and crazy, the examples he gives. Look at, for instance, Welcome to the Renaissance, number 6. Again, he's simply hearing a scale. He could be playing something like, or he could do something that, if you grew up playing a lot of classical period music, this looks very complicated. Actually, it's pretty easy to play 6 notes leading you to another note, or 5 notes leading you to another note. Let me demonstrate, and feel free to play along with me. Look at it. It's all part of a C major scale. This metronome is the half notes. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And just see if you can make it work. As you good musicians know, it's better to sing it first. So let's try number 6 and just get a feeling of it. I'll play along with you. 1, 2, and 6, and go. Let's do it. Again, like Renaissance art, Renaissance music is amazingly complex, amazingly thoughtful, but not abstract. This sounds like a tune. If somebody just played this, you wouldn't think, God, they're playing bizarre rhythms. It's a nice tune. Let's do it again. 1 and 2 and ready and go. Isn't that wonderful for you? It doesn't sound like most Renaissance music we hear. Right? Most people haven't quite gotten this kind of freedom and this kind of individuality in Renaissance music. So, but it's absolutely lovely. So if we have time, you want to come back and try some others, we will. Let me keep running through the material so I can leave you with things to practice. And how are we? Ooh, quickly. If you will forgive me, look at Ganassi's thirds. I just have the page Ganassi thirds. And if you will forgive me, we will come back to this. I simply took the liberty of writing in some possible expressions in here. So for instance, just in these thirds, if I played if I wanted to do, say, number 3 or maybe number 4, I might do that just to make it a little bit more sweet and lyric. So instead of number 4, I might go. And it's still the same tune, and you could even do it in complex chamber music because you haven't changed the structure of the music at all. You are still playing that tune just with your own expression. So let's turn on to the page called Cadences. Cadences. As you probably know, most Renaissance phrases end with one voice having a suspension figure. So if I'm assuming you're all very advanced players here. If not, you'll have to look it up or write me at some other point. So, for instance, oops, very often Renaissance phrases end with something, one voice going. While they're doing that, another voice makes them dissonant right before the end. So in these cadences, the frame before the numbered embellishments there, that F whole note, most of the time will start consonant, the other voices will change, it will become dissonant, and you should bring it out because the dissonance is the spice. It's part of the direction and drama of what the composer does in shaping Renaissance phrases. Most phrases tend to build in energy and complexity as they go along. Not all, but it's very typical. So that wonderful dissonance before the end is something you want to bring out. The worst place to breathe in Renaissance music is after that F whole note, because you break that unity of the dissonance going to the relaxation of the E half note here. So in the examples I gave, do not breathe after the F dotted half note or the F half note. It's all part of one syllable. So it would be very easy to hear the frame, sorry, and simply to embellish, to make even more of that drama there by just doing that little graceful embellishment number 1. If you only learn one cadential embellishment, that's the one. You can build on that very easily. Number 2 is similar, but a little bit, maybe a little bit more active, a little bit more flowing. Number 3, I think quite sweet and flowing. Number 4, maybe a little bit more billowing, maybe a little crescendo. So does it change it a lot? Maybe, maybe not. But it's a little bit like tone of voice, right? A good actor can say no in a certain tone of voice, and it can be wonderful simply because they're knowingly using their tone of voice and they're knowing how they're, again, touching from heart to heart through their art. The little piece at the bottom of the page is the top line of a Susato Allemande, and it's yes, it is in facsimile notation. You will memorize it instantly. The first note is a D above middle C. The reason I gave this here is it's 2 phrases repeated. It just goes. At the end, we could do a cadence, right? This piece has 2 cadences on F and 2 cadences on D. Have fun practicing your cadences. The last piece I want to give you is Ronde 5. So Ronde 5, and I want you to do the one that has just the empty staves on them. I'll explain that in just a sec. This is a lovely piece. I actually think about the Mona Lisa when I play this because it's a very simple, very pretty tune that just depends on how we play it, whether or not it's good art or not. So if you'll look at it, you see there's two repeated sections. Could we start with the second section? And what I've done is the top line is Susatos. The second line is my simplification of it, just so you can see the larger structure of going, in this case, in the second section, of going from an A to a G to an F. So, and in fact, if you look at that second section, do you see the 4 half notes preceding the final F? Does that look familiar? That's our cadence pattern that we did just a moment ago, right? So you can practice that 4 times in here. You can also start playing on the seconds, just the it's not so complicated, right? You'll miss notes, you'll get confused, you'll get lost. But if you do what we would do as simply good musicians and hear the melody, make sure that all you're doing in Renaissance improvisation is not composing, really. You are simply embellishing what's already there. As our swan song, David, do we still have time for 1 or 2 minutes, or do we need to?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're great.
Okay, because I do want to leave time for questions. Okay, so let's do this. Let's play the whole piece at least one time. There's 2 sections, A section, B section. So we'll play A, A, B, B. And look at it before you start. Look at the Susatos melody and look at my frame. So at the beginning of the piece, it's just F, G, and A. We've done that, right? We could do, or your own very free inspirations. And if you hear where you're going, you'll always be right. The worst that'll happen is you might play a funny note or 2 and you'll still be part of the piece. So when you play the first note, you have to know that you're going to a G. When you're on the G, you have to know that you're going to an A. And if you can do that, you are more than halfway there in your journey to be a good Renaissance improviser. Let's try it. Let's try it. And in fact, if you look at the second system of the piece, note 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is an F whole note going to an E, and in fact with that G before that, that's our cadence again, right? That second line, if I'm playing it, starting on the G, F, E half note. And that happens then into the next phrase, and it happens in both of the little phrases in the second section. So here where it goes, keep it simple at the beginning, do some rhythms, leave out a note or 2. Ganassi often does things like be off the beat or something. You can play an awful lot of variety and that in a way that's very easy to stay with the melody, but still make a lot of personal change. Let's try the piece. Shall I do this? Maybe you can, so you can hear me and let's do this. How about it? Happens. Da 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 dee da 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 dum. So we could do. Is that way too fast? I'll be glad to slow it down if anybody wants. There's no shame, be honest. Okay, so there's half notes. Let's play the whole piece. Experiment, but only experiment if you know where you're going. If you know where you're going, you've, like I said, you've really pretty much arrived. If you develop that ability to know where the phrase is going, you'll be a better musician. But it'll also contextualize all of your embellishments. So simply know where your changes are taking you. Whole piece, round 5, Susato. I'll give you 4 half notes count in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Repeat. And of course, like any fun activity, do this for an hour. There's no reason you couldn't do it. You'll memorize it almost instantly. Sing it, sing it, sing it. Even if you're not a good singer, even if you're not in tune, still singing it makes it, we internalize it more, we hear it more, we experience the piece. We're not so worried about being button pushers. But play it over and over and over. And you also have the parts to this piece from Laura's wonderful Serpent Publication website. You can do this with any voice, any part of the time, and have a group jam session like the final chorus in the Dixieland Band, and you can just sit there with your group and play this piece a dozen times and have a hell of a lot of fun with it. I hope this has been fun. I hope you'll feel like you know more about Renaissance music. I hope you will feel like you're on the path to being an improviser. And I hope you will feel enriched as a musician, that you hear more of the music that's in you and more how beautiful phrases you can play all the time. Are there any questions?
So if anyone has questions, feel free to put them, you can put them in the chat. You can raise your hand and we can unmute your microphone there. And if anyone who is joining us on Facebook has questions, you can put them in the comment and we'll bring them over into the Zoom as well. But now's the time for questions. I did put the link to Serpent Publications, and we've been sharing the links to all of the wonderful materials throughout the session, and I will put up the link to the full materials folder one more time here in case anyone missed that. So everything that's been discussed plus John's rehearsing Renaissance music is all included in there. So are there any questions?
I know the social aspect of this as well, so I would love to hear anybody's comments, disagreements, observations, anything.
We have one from on someone on Facebook who asked for your thoughts on vibrato. A really easy topic, I'm sure, to approach.
Well, it is kind of easy because we tend to think of vibrato as doing what a screaming opera singer would do, or as an insensitive string player who every long note they vibrate. right? Vibrato is a human experience. Vibrato is discussed in every single period. To me, it's not a question about vibrato. I use a lot of vibrato, but I like to think that I use it musically. So if I were playing a very pretty song and I play, I'm not so interested. It sounds nervous and it's all the same. Why would you do that? But having said that, I would use vibrato as one of the numerous tools like articulation or dynamics or anything. So I might go, other than that, you have to come take a private lesson. But it is a very medieval thing. It is a very Renaissance thing. But with all the nuances and vocal variety that they're doing, I think just a mindless vibrato is just bad musicianship. I don't think it's a question of vibrato. I think it's just bad musicianship. So use vibrato creatively. It's an ornament. It's an embellishment. Anybody else? Thank you for the comments, everybody. That was very nice.
Any other questions?
And you really can do this in any period. If you look at Chopin, Chopin is a brilliant improviser, and a lot of his the things we like most about Chopin, where he goes these wonderful roulades. He's improvising them. He just happened to write down something that he thought was particularly beautiful in that structure. But he was improvising them, and it's melodic improvisation. For the most part, he's not doing rhythmic improvisations, or he's not doing funky rock and roll chords or something like that. He's doing melodic improvisation. Listen to his beautiful nocturne in E flat, and you will hear beautiful, beautiful melodic improvisation. You can do this in any period. Anybody else? I'd love to see you.
Let's see. Here's another question from Facebook. Are the fast passages in Ganassi tongued or slurred?
Yes. There is mention about using head voice that implies just blowing without tonguing. Particularly for recorder players, because articulation is one of our fortes. Often when, and I play in ensembles with strings all the time, but often when we're doing Renaissance music, I'm tonguing, but they, to match with me, they have to slur, because recorder players can do things that we can do very easily that sound like, ooh, fancy double tonguing. Everyone can say toodaloo, toodaloo, or gotta get a little, daddy got a kitty, doggy doggy kitty kitty. All these little things that we can do very easily. So if you said toodaloo, to me, you can use that articulation as opposed to taka 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 that tends to be a lot more martial. So if I wanted to go, I could also go. I'm tonguing everything, but I can do, because recorder players have so many, we run the gamut of articulations from really spitting to almost sounding like slurred, then I think the majority of the time I would recommend exploring the possibilities of even in the fast notes, of tonguing it, and simply practice slowly and say, right? Then you have to practice and put it together 2 notes at a time, 4 notes at a time, but you can learn to do that. So Ganassi in his book Fontagara gives an amazing amount of how to tongue not only the consonants but the vowels. He gives ta, te, ti, to, tu. So he says very, very clearly at the beginning of the book, he says, instrumentalist, when your task is to imitate the voice, which is the best instrument and can do the most things. And he's saying really imitate when you're doing a song, just like a singer. They would enjoy making good sounds. They would enjoy telling the story interestingly, and they would enjoy the music of the poetry, right? If you said, once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary, then don't play it, but and pronounce the words. He's saying for all instrumentalists, but it's a particularly apropos thing to recorder, where we have that ability to speak our instrument, just the nature of the beast, right? We can't play big chords like a piano, but a piano can't, or a violin can't do the nuances of articulations that a recorder can do. So experiment with it, and look at Ganassi's book, and then try those on the fast notes. Almost all the time, I tongue almost everything, but sometimes I slur because it is another possibility.
I had another question that someone brought up in relationship to the comment about Chopin. They were saying that their observation was that Renaissance players, or at least what they have learned, had a stricter relationship with tempo. And the actual question says, I've heard many tell me this to the point of losing the human feeling, this relationship with tempo. What are your thoughts on that at Cadences and elsewhere about tempo?
So was the comment that Renaissance musicians keep a strict tempo?
Yeah, were more strict than, say, Chopin, is what the observation, or at least is the question. What do you think about that?
I would ask, on what do you base that? I don't feel that at all. We know that they comment in the 16th century that madrigals are not kept in the strict beat. They are storytelling. They are, in effect, and this is something that is still, for all of the variety of music we have, it's a little hard for us to think that language and music could be so close that you almost couldn't tell the difference between whether someone was singing beautifully or speaking normally. Mm-hmm. And we hear that some of the time. Frank Sinatra, whether you like Frank Sinatra or not, was very, very good at putting across a song with a lot of feeling. He sold a lot of records and sounding like he was talking. Nat King Cole did that. Numerous others, folk singers do that. Frescobaldi in the very late Renaissance says these toccatas are not to be played strictly. So if the person who was commenting was talking about tactus is a time, it is the way they feel the movement from one big note to the next big note. But it is not a beat, and it is not necessarily strict. So if we play dance music and it's a kind of dance that should be strict, I bring out the metronome, and our professional group rehearses with a metronome and nails it. But if you've ever listened to Strauss waltzes played by a very good orchestra, the tempo is not metronomic whatsoever. They go ba-dee-ya-ba-ba, wah-ba, wah-ba, ba-dee-da-da-dum, and it's beautiful dance music. So again, I don't think it's a question of should it be strict or should it not be strict. I would ask, what's the piece? What do you want to do with it? What story are you telling? I think there is, if anything, almost more freedom in Renaissance music when you're playing solo, unbarred melodies where everybody has their own vote. It's right, one person, one vote. It's not the Electoral College. I shouldn't say that, right? But where everybody is being a soloist, and the compositional construct depends on each person putting across their own part in their own way. You have to be flexible. You could have maybe a lot of times a feeling that there is a regular tempo between every whole note or every brev or something like that, and they talk about that. But that doesn't mean that there's a steady beat. Sometimes there's a very steady beat. Sometimes it's wonderful, but it's not necessarily part of Renaissance music to say we have to keep a steady beat any more than you keep a steady beat in a Schubert song. And Schubert songs are more metered because he's writing always in 3/4 or 4/4 time or something like that. I think Renaissance music is, if anything, more flexible than that. Get back to me.
Well, I'd like to thank you, John Tyson, for this wonderful presentation. I feel like everyone has probably learned a lot and has been a launching point for many, I'm sure. Once again, I'm going to put John's email address in the chat and in the comments on Facebook if anyone would like to continue their instruction in Renaissance improvisation. They can reach out to John, to you specifically. So once again, thank you so much for your presentation this evening.
Thank you. And get back to me for lessons, ensemble coaching, in anything, any repertoire. But I'd love to keep going on with Renaissance music with you. So let me know. Thank you all very much. Happy playing.
And thank you all for joining us, everyone, this evening. You can find this will be archived on our YouTube channel by tomorrow. And you can find our previous interest sessions and webinars all on the YouTube channel. And we also invite you back to our website, earlymusicamerica.org, where you can find out about upcoming presentations like this, as well as much of the other programming that EMA does throughout the year. And of course, we invite you to become a member of Early Music America or donate to support the early music field in North America. So on behalf of Early Music America, thank you all for joining us once again, and have a good evening.
Thank you, David, and everybody. I hope to see you again.